What if every family feud, every sibling rivalry, was orchestrated by your own mother? When a hidden diary reveals decades of manipulation, one child turns the tables, setting off a battle of wits that could destroy the family for good. The attic was thick with dust and the scent of old cedar, a place where forgotten things went to sleep. After their mother's stroke, the three siblings, Evelyn, Mark, and Julia, returned to the family home to sort through her belongings. The house was a museum of their childhood, faded photos, trophies, and the echoes of old arguments. Evelyn, the eldest, took charge, as always. Mark grumbled about being there, while Julia, the youngest, drifted from room to room, lost in memories. It was Julia who found the diary, tucked inside a box of Christmas ornaments. The leather cover was cracked, the pages yellowed. At first, she thought it was a journal of recipes or family stories. But as she read, her blood ran cold. The entries were meticulous, each one a record of whispered words, planted doubts, and carefully orchestrated conflicts. Their mother, Margaret, had been the architect of every feud, every falling out, every moment of sibling rivalry. Julia read about the time Evelyn and Mark stopped speaking for a year, how Margaret had fueled the fire with secret phone calls and subtle lies. She read about her own estrangement from Mark, the result of a rumor their mother had started. The diary was a blueprint for manipulation, a record of decades spent pulling the strings. Julia's hands shook as she realized the truth. Their mother had been the puppeteer, and they had all been her marionettes. Julia couldn't keep the discovery to herself. She called Evelyn and Mark into the attic, showing them the diary. At first, they refused to believe it. "Mom would never do that," Evelyn insisted. Mark scoffed. "She was strict, but she loved us." But as Julia read aloud the entries, each one marching a memory, a fight, a betrayal, their denial crumbled. The siblings spent hours poring over the diary, piecing together the ways Margaret had manipulated them. She'd played on their insecurities, pitted them against each other, and ensured that no alliance lasted long. Even their happiest memories were tainted by her interference. Evelyn was furious. "She ruined our lives," she spat. Mark was quieter, his anger simmering beneath the surface. Julia felt a strange mix of relief and grief. The diary explained so much, but it also left them with a question: why? What had driven their mother to orchestrate so much pain? As they argued, Julia realized something else. The diary didn't end with the last entry. There were blank pages at the back, pages she could use. Julia decided to turn the tables. She began writing her own entries in the diary, mimicking her mother's style. She planted small seeds of doubt, testing her siblings' reactions. She told Evelyn that Mark had been talking about selling the house. She hinted to Mark that Evelyn was hiding something about the will. At first, it was an experiment, a way to see if she could control the narrative as easily as their mother had. But soon, Julia found herself enjoying the power. She watched as Evelyn and Mark grew suspicious of each other, their old patterns resurfacing. Julia felt a thrill as she pulled the strings, orchestrating their every move. But the game was dangerous. The more Julia manipulated, the more she risked becoming like her mother. She struggled with guilt, but the temptation was too strong. For the first time, she understood the allure of control. Margaret, though weakened by her stroke, was not oblivious. She noticed the tension between her children, the way old wounds reopened. She called Julia to her bedside, her eyes sharp despite her frailty. "You think you're clever," she whispered. "But you're not the only one who knows how to play." Julia felt a chill. Had her mother guessed what she was doing? Margaret began to drop hints, sowing discord in subtle ways. She praised Evelyn's loyalty, criticized Mark's ambition, and reminded Julia of her failures. The siblings found themselves caught in a new web, unsure who was pulling the strings. Julia realized she was in a battle of wits with the master manipulator. She doubled down, using the diary to track her moves and anticipate her mother's. But Margaret was always one step ahead, turning the siblings against Julia whenever she got too close to the truth. The tension in the house reached a boiling point. Evelyn accused Mark of stealing from their mother's safe. Mark blamed Julia for spreading lies. Julia confronted Margaret, demanding to know why she'd spent her life manipulating her children. Margaret smiled, a glint of pride in her eyes. "Because I could. Because I wanted to see who was strong enough to survive." She admitted to orchestrating every feud, every heartbreak. "Family is a game, Julia. Only the clever win." Julia was horrified. She realized her mother felt no remorse, only satisfaction at the chaos she'd created. Julia vowed to end the cycle, but Margaret warned her, "You're more like me than you think." Julia decided to come clean. She confessed to Evelyn and Mark that she'd been manipulating them, using the diary to test their reactions. At first, they were furious. But as they talked, they realized they'd all been victims of Margaret's games. For the first time in years, the siblings worked together. They confronted Margaret as a united front, refusing to play her games any longer. Margaret, faced with their solidarity, grew bitter and withdrawn. The siblings made a pact: no more secrets, no more manipulation. They agreed to divide the estate fairly and support each other, no matter what. The power of Margaret's diary was broken, at least for now. But Margaret wasn't finished. She revealed a new secret, a second diary, hidden in her room, containing confessions and threats against each child. She threatened to expose their darkest secrets unless they did as she wished. Julia, Evelyn, and Mark were shaken. The diary contained truths they'd never shared with anyone: affairs, debts, betrayals. Margaret demanded they sign over their shares of the estate to her favorite charity, or she would go public. Julia realized the only way to win was to take control of the narrative. She convinced her siblings to confess their secrets to each other, taking away Margaret's leverage. They shared their stories, forgave each other, and agreed to face the consequences together. With her power gone, Margaret's health declined. The siblings took care of her, but refused to let her manipulate them any longer. Julia destroyed the second diary, ensuring their secrets would never be used against them. The siblings began to rebuild their relationships, learning to trust each other for the first time. They sold the family home, splitting the proceeds equally. Julia kept the original diary as a reminder of the dangers of control. Margaret, realizing she had lost, grew quiet. She died a few months later, leaving behind a family forever changed by her games. After Margaret's funeral, the siblings gathered to reflect on their journey. They acknowledged the pain their mother had caused, but also the strength they'd found in each other. Julia apologized for her own manipulations, and Evelyn and Mark forgave her. They decided to use part of their inheritance to fund a support group for families dealing with toxic dynamics. Julia wrote an article about their experience, hoping to help others break free from cycles of control. The siblings stayed close, supporting each other through life's challenges. The diary remained locked away, a symbol of the past they'd overcome. Years later, Julia visited the old house, now a community center. She walked through the attic, remembering the day she found the diary. She realized that the true legacy of her family wasn't manipulation, but resilience. Julia smiled, knowing she and her siblings had broken the cycle. They had chosen honesty over control, love over fear. The Puppeteer's diary was closed for good. If you believe in the power of breaking toxic cycles and choosing honesty, share this story with someone who needs hope. What would you do if you discovered your family was being manipulated for decades? Let us know in the comments below.